What happens when a destroyer runs out of depth charges in the middle of the North Atlantic, with a German U-boat still very much alive below the surface? Do you break off the attack? Do you wait for reinforcements? Or do you find another way? In the early morning darkness of November 1st, 1943, the USS Bory would be forced to answer that question in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. This is the story of how one American destroyer, out of ammunition and out of options, dropped her final depth charges empty until the U-boat surfaced, and the battle descended into a brutal, close-quarters brawl that historians would later call the most spectacular surface engagement since the days of John Paul Jones. To understand this moment, we have to understand the hunters and the hunted. The USS Bory, designated DD-215, was a Clemson-class destroyer. By 1943, she was already old, a veteran of over 20 years of service, with thin hull plating and worn machinery. But she had been refitted for one specific purpose: killing submarines. Her main battery consisted of 4 4-inch guns, but her teeth were her depth charges, 36 of them, stored on 2 stern tracks and 6 K-gun projectors. Her captain was a 30-year-old reservist named Lieutenant Charles Hutchins, reportedly the youngest destroyer skipper in the Navy at the time. His crew were mostly reservists as well, but they had served together for nearly 3 years. They were a tight-knit crew, confident in their ship. Their quarry, U-405, was a Type 7 IC U-boat commanded by 37-year-old Korvettenkapitän Rolf Heinrich Hoppmann. This was his 8th war patrol. Hoppmann was a veteran, well-liked by his 49 crewmen. His boat bore the emblem of the 11th U-boat, Flotilla, a polar bear on the conning tower. On this night, U-405 was operating as part of the Siegfried I Wolf Pack, heading for a mid-ocean rendezvous to refuel. Neither crew knew it, but their 2 ships were on a collision course with destiny. The hunt began on the evening of October 31st. The Bory was part of a hunter-killer group built around the escort carrier USS Card. Aircraft from the Card had attacked a U-boat supply rendezvous, and now Captain Hutchins had orders to hunt down any survivors. At 2010 hours, the Bory's radar picked up a contact at 6,500 yards. It was U-256, a flak boat. The Bory attacked with star shells and depth charges, forcing the U-boat down and eventually claiming a kill. Though, unknown to Hutchins at the time, U-256 would survive and limp back to France. Pause. But there was no time to celebrate. Less than an hour later, at 2300 hours, the radar operator sang out again. A new contact, this time at 8,000 yards. The Bory accelerated to 27 knots, cutting through the building seas. But at 2,800 yards, the target vanished. U-405 had submerged. Hutchins slowed his ship, gained a sound contact, and prepared for a depth charge run. Then disaster. A mechanical malfunction caused the entire contents of both stern tracks to release at once. 30 depth charges, hundreds of pounds of high explosive, detonated in a single, thunderous roar. The force of the blast lifted the Bory's stern clean out of the water. But it also did something else. It drove U-405 to the surface. The concussion had damaged the U-boat's ballast tanks, and now she was on the surface, dead in the water. The Bory's searchlight snapped on, illuminating the light gray submarine with its polar bear emblem. The fight was about to begin. The Bory's guns opened fire immediately. The first director-controlled salvo from her 4-inch gun struck the U-boat's deck, literally blasting the 88mm deck gun into the ocean. German sailors scrambled to man their 20mm anti-aircraft guns, but the American fire was relentless. They were cut down before they could fire a shot. Hoppmann, however, was a skilled seaman. Despite the damage, he used the U-boat's tighter turning radius to maneuver, trying to evade the destroyer's guns. For 10 minutes, the 2 ships circled each other in the darkness, trading fire. But then Hutchins made a decision. He wasn't going to let this U-boat escape. The order echoed through the Bory. "Stand by for a ram." Hutchins aimed for the U-boat's starboard quarter, but as the Bory closed at 25 knots, a massive wave lifted the destroyer and crashed her down onto U-405's deck at a 30-degree angle. The 2 ships were locked together in a lethal embrace. For the next 10 minutes, the battle descended into something from a bygone era of naval warfare. The Bory's 4-inch guns were now useless. unable to depress low enough to hit the submarine. So the crew resorted to other means. Following a drill they had practiced for months, sailors armed themselves with Thompson submachine guns, pistols, and shotguns. They lined the port side and rained fire down onto the U-boat's deck. The Germans, for their part, fought back with equal ferocity, trying to man their guns or throw grenades, but the American fire was too heavy. In the chaos, moments of surreal violence unfolded. Fireman First Class David Southwick, out of ammunition, threw his sheath knife at a German sailor less than 10 yards away. It found its mark. Chief Boatswain's mate Walter Cruz hurled a spent 4-inch shell casing at another German, knocking him into the frigid sea. For 10 minutes, it was not a modern naval battle. It was a knife fight on the high seas. Then the ships separated. The Bory was badly holed along her entire port side, her forward engine room flooding with icy water. But U-405 was dying. After a final barrage of shallow set, depth charges, and a 4-inch shell that struck the submarine's hull, Hopman's boat came to a stop. The crew could be seen in the searchlight, launching yellow rubber rafts, signaling surrender, pause. The battle was over, but the cost was staggering. Of the 49 German sailors on U-405, nearly all were dead, either killed in the fight or lost in the freezing Atlantic. U-405 slipped beneath the waves at 49 degrees north, 31 degrees west. But the Bory was also dying. The damage was catastrophic. The engine room was flooding, the fires were going out, and the ship was losing power. For the next 18 hours, the crew fought a desperate damage control battle, throwing ammunition and equipment overboard to stay afloat. At 0900 on November 1st, the last turbine stopped. Radiomen managed to get an auxiliary generator working long, enough to transmit a final message. Commence sinking. At 16:30, Captain Hutchins gave the order to abandon ship. Destroyers Gough and Barry raced to the scene, pulling survivors from 40-foot waves. 27 men from the Bory's crew of 122 perished in the rescue, succumbing to the cold and the brutal sea. Notably, not a single sailor had been killed during the actual battle with U-405. The next morning, a Grumman Avenger from the USS Card sank the abandoned Bory with bombs. She went down as a valiant lady. For their actions, the crew of the Bory was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. Lieutenant Hutchins received the Navy Cross. Pause. The Battle of the Atlantic was won not by battleships or carriers, but by men on ships like the Bory, who fought with everything they had. And when they had nothing left, they fought with what they could throw. The story of the Bory and U-405 is a testament to the sheer determination of those who served on the front lines of the war against the U-boats,